It's garbage. Start over. That's all he said. 3 years, 36 months of trial runs, failures, late nights, breakthroughs, and missed birthdays, reduced to 2 words and a dismissive wave of his hand. I stood there, holding the prototype in my trembling hands, my heart pounding so loud I could barely hear the rest of what he was saying. Jesse. Robert, our CEO, sighed as if I'd just spilled coffee on his desk instead of presenting the project that could redefine our entire industry. You're too attached to your own ideas. That's the problem with researchers like you. You lose sight of business reality. He didn't even look at the prototype, just stared at the presentation slide behind me, then at his phone. Sir, I began, my voice low. The performance data speaks for itself. We've increased efficiency by 47%. The materials cost is down by 22%. The entire model... Robert raised a hand. I said it's garbage. The conference room fell silent. Around the table, my team avoided eye contact. Engineers, analysts, assistants, everyone who had spent years watching this project take shape. Not one of them said a word. The room felt colder suddenly. I understand, I whispered. My throat tightened. Do you want me to start a new concept or refine this one? He leaned back, smirking. Start over, and this time, let the senior engineers handle it. You've had your fun laughter rippled from the far end of the table. My stomach turned. That laughter, his, theirs, was the sound that broke something inside me. I walked out of that room in silence, clutching the prototype case. Outside, the hallway lights blurred through the tears I refused to let fall. 3 years ago, I'd been the one Robert personally selected for this R&D initiative. Project Arcadia. Back then, he'd called me the future of the company. Now, apparently, I was expendable. When I reached my lab, I set the prototype on the bench and stared at it under the harsh fluorescent light. Every component, every code line, every calculation. It was mine. I had written, tested, and designed nearly every aspect of this system myself. I'd missed family holidays for it. I'd moved apartments to be closer to the office. I'd believed in the vision more than anyone else. And now it was garbage. For the rest of the day, I sat in silence at my workstation. At 6:42 p.m., long after everyone had gone home, I finally opened my private design folder. Not the one on the company network. The one I kept offline, on an encrypted drive, updated daily. My own personal log of every development stage, all my notes, the timestamps, my original source code. The idea had started as a personal experiment before the company funded it. I had registered early concept documentation under my name before the corporate version of the project existed. It wasn't illegal. It was smart documentation practice. Back then, I'd never thought it would matter. Now, it might be everything. The next morning, I got up before dawn, unable to sleep. I brewed coffee, sat on my couch, and stared at the prototype box sitting by my bag. For the first time, I didn't feel loyalty. I felt clarity. Robert had no idea that the project's architecture, the one he dismissed, had already been mirrored and legally logged under my personal research entity. My name was attached. My timestamps were intact. He thought I'd start over. I wouldn't. By 8 a.m., I was sitting in my office drafting a short internal memo. Effective immediately, I am requesting reassignment from Project Arcadia to the Energy Integration Unit, focusing on software calibration and automation testing. It sounded routine, non-confrontational, corporate noise. Robert would barely glance at it before approving. At 9:17 a.m., his assistant replied, Approved. Report to the integration unit next Monday, perfect. Now I had 1 week, one quiet week, to file the necessary documentation. I spent every spare minute preparing, cross-verifying design logs, backing up source data, scanning my personal journals, emailing nothing. Everything offline, encrypted, safe. On Friday night, I sat alone in the empty lab for the last time. The fluorescent light flickered, casting long shadows over the workbench. I ran my fingers over the prototype and whispered, They called you garbage. I smiled faintly. We'll see. I unplugged the main system, placed it carefully into a protective case, and locked my personal notes away. The patent paperwork was already in motion, under my name, my documentation, my design. Not as an employee of Helix Technologies, as Jessica Reynolds, independent inventor. Before leaving, I turned off the lab lights and took one last look through the glass. The same room where I'd once felt limitless possibility now looked sterile and foreign. 12 hours earlier, I'd been a loyal engineer. Now I was something else entirely. A line had been crossed. Not by me, but by a man who thought vision could be crushed by ego. And I couldn't wait for him to realize how wrong he was. Monday morning came too soon. I barely slept the entire weekend, replaying Robert's voice in my mind. It's garbage. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his smirk, that flicker of satisfaction he got from reminding people who held the power. When I arrived at the office, everything looked exactly the same. The polished marble floors, the echo of heels on tile, the faint hum of fluorescent lights. But something in me had shifted. I wasn't walking in as an employee anymore. I was walking in as the quiet owner of something Helix Technologies didn't know it had already lost. At 9:03 a.m., I met with HR for a quick reassignment briefing. The department head, Marcy, handed me a stack of papers. "Just standard transfer documents, Jessie," she said, glancing at her watch. "Sign here, here, and here." I flipped through them carefully, reading every line. Years in R&D had taught me to never skim fine print. That's when I saw it. A clause buried near the end. Employee acknowledges that all intellectual property developed during the period of employment, regardless of equipment or hours, is property of Helix Technologies. I paused, pen in hand. "Marcy," I said evenly, "this clause wasn't in my original contract." She frowned, pushing her glasses up her nose. "Oh, that's just a standard update. Legal made a few additions last quarter. Nothing to worry about." My pulse quickened. "So if I sign this, everything I've ever developed while employed here automatically belongs to the company?" "Well," she hesitated, "technically, yes. But it's standard across the industry. You'll be fine." I smiled. "Then I'll need a day to review it." She blinked, surprised. "Jessie, this is just a transfer, not a new job offer." "Still," I replied softly, sliding the papers back across the desk, "I'd like my lawyer to look over it." Marcy sighed. "Suit yourself." I walked out with the unsigned papers tucked under my arm. That one clause confirmed everything. I wasn't paranoid. They were tightening their legal grip, and I'd almost signed it away. That evening, I drove home through sheets of rain. The windshield wipers fought against the downpour, and the city lights blurred into streaks of gold and red. I parked outside my apartment and sat in silence, listening to the rain drum on the roof. My apartment was small, practical. One bedroom, too many notebooks, and a single framed photo of my father on the desk. He'd been a mechanical engineer, too. He used to say, "Protect your ideas like you'd protect your heart. People will take both if you let them." He was right. I powered on my laptop and opened the draft of my patent filing. The documents were complete. The detailed designs, the timestamps, the model testing results. The system wasn't just a prototype anymore. It was an intellectual property ready for registration. But there was one last step, the signature. A strange calm came over me as I entered my legal information. It wasn't revenge. Not yet. It was survival. At 10:47 p.m., I scrolled to the bottom of the application, placed my cursor over the final box, and typed, "Inventor, Jessica Reynolds." Then I clicked Submit. The confirmation email arrived seconds later. It was done. The system that Robert had called garbage now belonged to me. Legally, undeniably. 3 days later, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. "Jessica Reynolds?" a man's voice asked. "Yes, speaking." "This is Ethan Walker from Orion Dynamics." My heart skipped. Orion, Helix's biggest competitor. "I hope I'm not calling at a bad time," he continued. "We've been following your work for a while. In fact, one of your published research abstracts caught my attention last quarter." "My research, not Helix's, mine." "I'm listening," I said carefully. "Are you currently under any restrictive contracts?" I smiled faintly. Not that I'm aware of. Well, he said, we're very interested in a technology that seems similar to something our R&D department's been exploring. Would you be open to a meeting? Off the record, of course. When? Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. We can meet at the Harborview Cafe. Discreet but quiet. You'll recognize me. I'll be the guy with the blue folder. When the call ended, I sat back, staring at the phone in my hand. It wasn't luck. Orion had been watching the same way I had been watching Helix, waiting for someone to blink. And Robert had just blinked. The next morning, I dressed simply. Black blouse, dark jeans, hair tied back. Professional, but not corporate. I arrived at the cafe 15 minutes early and took a corner seat facing the door. At 8:58, Ethan walked in. Mid-40s, confident, not arrogant. He carried himself like someone used to hearing yes. He spotted me immediately and approached with a polite nod. Ms. Reynolds, he said, shaking my hand. Thank you for meeting me. We ordered coffee, made small talk for a few minutes, and then he leaned forward slightly. I'll be direct. We know about the Arcadia system. My pulse quickened. That's a Helix internal project. Not anymore, he said, sliding the blue folder across the table. Inside was a printed patent application, with my name on it. We have friends at the registry. Congratulations, by the way, I exhaled slowly. You move fast. So do you? He replied. We'd like to license it. Fairly. Legally. And make sure the world knows whose idea it really was. I looked at him for a long moment, the hum of the cafe fading behind us. Tell me more, I said finally. And just like that, the story of Project Arcadia began its second life, one that Robert would never see coming. The next day, I sat in the glass-walled conference room of Orion Dynamics, watching the rain trace patterns across the skyline. It felt strange being in a competitor's headquarters, familiar and foreign at the same time. The same sterile air, the same polished surfaces, but the energy was different. Lighter, curious. Ethan entered with two other people, a woman in a gray suit and a man carrying a thin laptop. Jesse, he said warmly. Thank you for coming on such short notice. This is Claire, our legal counsel, and Alex, head of R&D. Claire gave me a polite nod. Alex smiled and said, We've read your documentation. Impressive work. You did all of this under Helix? Mostly, I said, choosing my words carefully. Some of the foundational designs were developed independently before company funding. Claire looked up from her notes. We verified that. The timestamps on your prototype logs predate Helix's internal project charter by nearly a year. That small confirmation felt like oxygen. I'd been holding my breath since the moment I'd submitted the patent. Ethan slid a folder toward me. Here's what we're proposing. An exclusive licensing agreement for your patent. You retain ownership. We pay a fixed annual fee plus royalties on every unit produced. I skimmed the document. The terms were better than I expected. Fair, transparent, no traps buried in the fine print. Still, my hands trembled slightly. This all feels fast. Ethan leaned back. We've been developing something similar, but your system's architecture is far superior. It would take us years to catch up. You've done the hard part already. We'd rather collaborate than compete. I studied him. His tone wasn't manipulative. It was pragmatic. He wasn't trying to exploit me. He was trying to make a deal that made sense. I looked up. I'll need a clause ensuring that I remain publicly recognized as the inventor. Already included, Claire said without missing a beat, and full transparency on manufacturing data. Of course. And, I added after a pause, employment for any engineers displaced if Helix collapses because of this. Some of them are innocent in all this. Ethan smiled faintly. You're thinking long-term. I like that I took a deep breath and signed. Just like that, 3 years of humiliation transformed into ownership, independence, and leverage. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the apartment felt like my heartbeat, uneven, anxious, electric. Had I gone too far? Was I ready for what would follow when Helix found out? My phone buzzed at 11:42 p.m. A new email notification lit up the screen. Subject: Patent confirmation. U.S. filing 298417. B status: approved. Pending publication. I stared at it for a long time, the pale light reflecting in my coffee mug. It was real now. No going back. 2 weeks later, Orion officially unveiled the partnership in a controlled press release. They didn't name me directly, but insiders would know. The phrasing was careful. Orion Dynamics announces exclusive rights to a next-generation efficiency system developed by independent researcher Jessica Reynolds. Within hours, the post spread through industry news sites. Helix employees shared it privately, speculating. I watched from the sidelines as whispers spread. By Friday, Robert summoned me to his office. I knew it was coming. The message from his assistant was polite but curt. The CEO would like to discuss your transition progress. I walked in at 4:15 p.m. Robert sat behind his desk, his expression unreadable. Close the door, he said. I did. Jesse? He began slowly. There's something I need to clarify. Did you file any external patents related to Project Arcadia? My heart thudded, but my voice stayed calm. Why do you ask? Because, he said, tapping his phone. Our legal department just received inquiries about a technology suspiciously similar to Arcadia, licensed to Orion Dynamics. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you? He looked at me with the faintest smirk, as if he already knew the answer but wanted to hear me deny it. I met his gaze. Project Arcadia was canceled, remember? You called it garbage. His smirk faltered. That's not the point. If you took company property... I didn't. I cut in quietly. I filed a patent for a system I developed independently, using my own resources. The design predates Helix's internal documents by a year. You can check. He stared at me for a long moment, his jaw tightening. You don't understand what you've done. Oh, I said, standing. I think I understand perfectly. That evening, I drove home with shaking hands. It wasn't the confrontation that rattled me. It was the silence afterward. Robert hadn't yelled. He hadn't threatened. He'd simply gone quiet, which was worse. The next morning, my email access was revoked. My company ID stopped working. No explanation, no official termination notice, just digital erasure. I expected anger, maybe fear. Instead, I felt relief. At 9:30 a.m., I received a text from Ethan. News travels fast. Don't worry. Everything is protected. Press embargo ends next week. That's when the real fireworks would begin. Because Helix had scheduled their annual product launch for next Friday, an event Robert had promised would redefine industry standards. He had no idea that the technology he was about to showcase didn't belong to him anymore, and that his garbage prototype was about to make headlines under another company's name. The morning of the Helix product launch felt like the calm before a storm. I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of black coffee, scrolling through the live feed link my former coworkers had shared in a group chat. The event was being streamed from Helix's downtown auditorium, a sea of lights, banners, and sharp suits. The title behind the stage read, Helix Technologies Innovating the Future. My name used to belong to that future. I wasn't supposed to care, but I couldn't look away. At 10:02 a.m., the camera panned across the stage. Robert stood in the spotlight, smiling with that same confidence I'd once mistaken for vision. The audience applauded. He raised a hand, motioning for quiet. Today, he said, voice booming through the speakers, we unveil the next generation of energy optimization, technology that will redefine logistics and manufacturing efficiency across industries. This is Helix's proudest moment. My stomach twisted. I recognized the outline on the big screen behind him, the shape of the system, the architecture. My system. I froze. They hadn't just tried to copy it, they were launching it. I felt my pulse in my throat. Ethan's voice echoed in my memory. The embargo lifts at noon. It was 10:05. Robert continued his speech, pacing with rehearsed energy. He pointed at the screen. Our revolutionary process will outpace our competitors by years. This is what true innovation looks like. The crowd applauded again. I clenched my coffee mug so tightly I thought it might crack. A notification pinged on my phone. Ethan had sent a single-line message. Watch closely. My eyes flicked back to the live stream. Robert smiled as the lights dimmed. A massive LED screen flickered to a slick video montage. Workers in labs, machines humming, bright taglines about progress and sustainability. The final frame read, Helix Arcadia System, patent pending. And then, suddenly, the feed stuttered. A new logo appeared on the screen. Not Helix's, Orion's. The audience murmured. Confused faces turned toward the technicians near the stage. A new voice, confident, clear, came through the speakers. It wasn't Robert's. It was Ethan's. Good morning. Orion Dynamics is proud to announce the official launch of the Arcadia system, under exclusive license from its inventor, Jessica Reynolds. My breath caught. The Helix logo behind Robert faded completely, replaced by Orion's deep blue emblem. On the lower third of the screen, a legal disclaimer appeared in small white text. Patent number 298417B, registered to Jessica Reynolds. All rights reserved. Robert froze mid-sentence. He looked around as if the stage itself had turned against him. The audience began whispering, some even pulling out their phones. The livestream chat exploded. I could almost hear the panic in the control booth. Cut the feed, someone yelled in the background. The video abruptly ended, replaced by a black screen with the Helix logo flickering uncertainly. I sat in stunned silence, staring at the reflection of my own face in the blank laptop screen. It had happened. The truth was public now. My phone started vibrating. Texts, calls, notifications stacking one over another. Friends, former colleagues, even reporters. One message stood out. From Marcy in HR. What did you do, Jesse? The board is losing their minds. Another from an engineer I'd mentored. They're saying the patent's yours. Is it true? I typed slowly. Yes. Then turned off my phone. 2 hours later, I drove to Orion's headquarters. Security buzzed me in immediately. Ethan was waiting in the lobby, his expression a mix of satisfaction and concern. That went viral faster than expected, he said quietly. You okay? I nodded, though my hands were shaking. I didn't expect it to feel like this. Like what? Like revenge and grief at the same time. He gave a small, knowing smile. That's usually how justice feels. We walked toward the elevator. As the doors closed, Ethan's phone buzzed. He read the message and turned the screen toward me. It was a breaking news alert. Helix Technologies faces patent dispute scandal. CEO accused of misrepresentation. Robert's giving a press statement at 3, Ethan said. He's denying everything, of course. Of course, I murmured. That afternoon, I watched the footage on mute. Robert stood before a row of microphones, sweat visible on his forehead. We are investigating the matter internally, he said, forcing a smile. Helix Technologies has always operated with integrity. But I could see it in his eyes. The panic, the disbelief. He thought loyalty meant silence. He never imagined it could mean evidence. By evening, my inbox filled with media requests. Orion's communications team filtered them carefully, preparing a joint statement for release the next morning. I sat by the window, the city glowing beneath me. My reflection in the glass looked different. Older, maybe, but stronger. 3 years ago, I'd walked into Helix believing hard work was enough. Today, I understood something far more powerful. Recognition isn't given. It's claimed. When I finally turned off my laptop, I noticed one last message waiting in my inbox. No name, no subject line, just a single sentence. You won't get away with this. The sender's address was hidden, but I didn't need to guess. Robert wasn't done, but neither was I. The week after the launch felt surreal, like watching a slow-motion explosion from a safe distance. Helix's stock plummeted 28% in 3 days. News outlets replayed the footage from the failed product launch on a loop, dissecting every second. Analysts called it one of the biggest corporate embarrassments of the decade. Reporters camped outside Helix's headquarters. Employees leaked internal emails showing how Robert had dismissed Project Arcadia, calling it a waste of resources. My name was mentioned in nearly every article. I tried to stay calm, but every headline felt heavier than the last. Engineer outsmarts CEO. Inventor who brought a giant to its knees. From garbage to gold. It wasn't fame I wanted. It was validation. Yet, the more recognition I received, the more conflicted I felt. On Wednesday morning, Ethan knocked on my office door at Orion. I had officially joined as Director of Research Integration 2 days earlier. "You should see this," he said, stepping inside and turning his tablet toward me. On the screen was a letter, formal, precise, with the Helix logo in the corner. Subject: Notice of legal action, alleged misappropriation of intellectual property. I sighed. I was expecting this. Ethan nodded. Our legal team already reviewed it. They have no case. The timestamps on your original documentation are airtight. The patent office confirmed it twice. I stared at the letter anyway. My name in bold next to theirs. Helix Technologies versus Jessica Reynolds. It was strange how official paper could make victory feel so hollow. The next morning, I was summoned to a federal hearing for preliminary review. The courtroom was sterile, too bright, with microphones that caught every shallow breath. Robert sat at the opposite table, looking smaller than I remembered. The arrogance was gone. He seemed tired. His lawyer argued that the algorithms were developed within the scope of her employment, despite my documentation proving otherwise. When my turn came, I handed over the evidence. My notebooks, dated prototypes, personal device logs, everything meticulously labeled, verified by third-party experts. The judge took less than an hour to issue a ruling. The court finds that the intellectual property in question was developed independently and legally registered by the plaintiff, Jessica Reynolds. The case against her is dismissed. A wave of murmurs rippled through the courtroom. I exhaled for the first time in what felt like months. Robert didn't look at me as I walked past, but I heard him whisper to his lawyer, voice cracking. She destroyed everything. I paused in the aisle. No, I said quietly without turning. You did. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Microphones, flashing cameras, shouted questions. Ethan guided me through the crowd, hand on my shoulder. Jesse, are you planning to sue Helix for damages? What's next for you? Do you have anything to say to your former CEO? I stopped just long enough to answer. Yes, I said simply. To every person who's ever been told their work was worthless, you're not. Don't let someone else define your value. That clip went viral within hours. I didn't plan it, but maybe people needed to hear it. Over the following months, Helix unraveled. The board forced Robert to resign. Several executives followed. Internal documents surfaced showing years of mismanagement, credit theft, and toxic leadership. Meanwhile, Orion thrived. The Arcadia system became an industry standard. The royalties alone surpassed anything I'd ever imagined earning. My name appeared in trade journals, academic papers, and, ironically, Helix's competitor training materials. But the real victory came in quieter moments. One afternoon, a message appeared in my inbox. The sender's name made my heart tighten. From Robert Hale. Subject: no excuses left. I hesitated, then opened it. I thought success meant control. That leadership meant taking credit. You proved me wrong. I've lost my company, my career, and most of the people who trusted me. But I needed to tell you this. You were right. Arcadia was never garbage. It was genius. I just wasn't smart enough to see it. I read it twice. Then, without bitterness, I replied, Acknowledgement doesn't erase what happened, but I appreciate the honesty. I hope you find something to build again. This time without stepping on others. I never heard from him again, but I didn't need to. Some endings don't require applause. Just silence. 6 months later, I stood at Orion's annual conference, looking out at a packed auditorium. Behind me, the words glowed on the screen. Recognizing value from ideas to impact. I took a deep breath and began. I used to think loyalty was the same as gratitude. That staying quiet meant being professional. But silence doesn't build progress. It protects those who take advantage of it. I learned that the hard way the audience listened intently. Engineers, researchers, interns, All faces I could have once seen at Helix. 3 words almost erased 3 years of work. I continued. It's garbage. Start over. Those words pushed me to realize that worth isn't given. It's proven, protected, and owned. If you take one thing from my story, let it be this. Never let someone else sign their name on your effort. Applause erupted, but it wasn't for revenge. It was for recognition, for resilience. That night, I stood on the balcony of my apartment, city lights flickering below. The air was cool, and for the first time in years, I felt still. The Arcadia patent hung framed on my wall, not as a trophy, but as a reminder. Revenge had never been the goal. The real victory was rebuilding my confidence, piece by piece, until I no longer needed anyone's approval. Robert's laughter no longer echoed in my mind. Only my own quiet certainty remained. Because in the end, I hadn't destroyed Helix. I'd just stopped letting them destroy me.